Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. One more week before we turn the calendar to the penultimate month of 2024, but not before a few more podcasts on deck, starting with this one coming right at you as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle or even as early as this past Monday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And now that we're just one day away on the eve of another World Series, a World Series that I'm sure a lot of people were anticipating maybe even a few years ago, but it had never come to fruition. But now a little more than 24 hours away from Yankees-Dodgers, New York, LA, the history between these two franchises dating back to the days of the Brooklyn Dodgers, which I'll get to in a moment. And one that I will say that I'm actually glad that is going to take place, and I look forward to witnessing that. And for those who are probably wondering, it's like, wait a minute, JAYREELZ, but your Mets were one step away from the World Series and obviously lost to the Dodgers. So you mean to tell me you would have preferred Yankees-Dodgers over a Subway Series, another one I might add, than your beloved Mets? Well, I'd have to sadly admit that, yes, I would love my Mets to be there. I get it. But to me, it would have been just agonizing, to say the least, because A, I'd have to deal with another Subway Series, as I just mentioned, 2000, where the Yankees won in 5 games. It celebrated on the Shea Stadium field. Number 2, when we look at what happened this year between the two franchises, where the Mets swept the Yankees in the regular season, and not only just swept them, they embarrassed the Yankees. And to think, all the press this week would have been about that Subway Series during the regular season, to where the Yankees would have been ad nauseum having to hear what the Met Bats did to Garrett Cole in 2 games, as he went 0-2 against the Mets this year, and how they just bludgeoned them. Other than the one game at Yankee Stadium, the first of 2 where they won 3-2, they beat them by the scores of, 11-3, 12-2. The other game was 9-7, where Aaron Judge hit a grand slam, but the Mets pretty much went going away winning that game. And all that the Yankee players would have had to hear all week would have been those 4 games. And how that would have looked from the baseball gods on down would have said, okay, well, since the Mets had the regular season, we want to give the Yankees the World Series and win the whole thing. Now, of course, that's just me being a kook of a sports fan. But in all seriousness, how I would have looked at it was that even if the Mets would have won the NLCS and beaten the Dodgers, even with a few days off, I think they would have ran out of gas. As you saw, their pitching faltered down the stretch, and whatever magic that the Mets had went poof into the LA night there on Sunday when they lost in 6 games. So even if that would have flipped the script and somehow, some way the Mets would have won, I still think with even all the momentum and all of the magic and everything that had transpired with this team over the last month, I think it would have fallen short in the World Series. And that's just me. We'll never know. We'll never see that. But Yankees-Dodgers is obviously that much more attractive to the nation, because if you recall, 24 years ago, the ratings for the Subway Series, granted that the games were close and granted that the series wasn't close, but really was not impactful outside of the tri-state area. And I feel that that would have been the same situation this time around, but And even though you have a scenario where it's East versus West, New York, LA, and 2 big markets with 2 big payrolls, I get it that people in middle America are going to look at that and say, I don't care who wins because they spend the most money. And I think this will be a different World Series altogether, which I will unpack also in a little bit. But there's also an underlying personal investment that I have here. And I'm going to tackle that at the very end, but I'm going to start it off by saying this. The Yankees are 4 wins away from me possibly having a sleepless winter. So there's your little tease as we go through it. And all I'm going to say about this World Series, as much as it's highly anticipated, etc., and I mentioned this on Monday's podcast, but if this series goes at least 6 games, which I think it will, anything less than that, I'd be surprised. So if the Yankees or Dodgers win in 4 or 5, more so 5, I do not expect a sweep here by any stretch. But let's just say Yankees or Dodgers win in 5, I would really be surprised if that's the case. So I would expect a long series. But if it goes 6 or 7 games, and if the ratings, and I understand we're in 2024, there are a lot of other distractions, a lot of other things to watch, stream, etc. 100%. But when you have the 2 biggest teams in the sport, where arguably you have the 2 best players in the sport, and I don't even think it's an argument, because when you look at the Yankees' Aaron Judge and the Dodgers' Shohei Ohtani, both of those guys who have already won MVPs in the past are in all likelihood going to win the MVP this year. So you have that head-to-head matchup. And then on top of the history between the 2 teams, and I get it that the 20-year-old doesn't even recall that the Dodgers played in Brooklyn once upon a time. They'll probably even look at you if you have 10 heads and say, wait a minute, the Dodgers played in Brooklyn? Yes, they did. But for this series, with all the star power and the attraction that these 2 teams you would think would generate, this should be a series that they would be doing handstands. And I would think would attract at least 20 million viewers when you get to the latter part of this series, if it does get to go 6 or 7 games. Because in recent memory, you haven't had ratings. You haven't had people run to the sets to watch baseball in a World Series setting to where you're going to get anywhere between 15, 18, 20 million viewers. In fact, I think the Game 7 Cubs and Indians in 2016, if I'm not mistaken, Game 7, and granted it was for all the marbles, and the Cubs were trying to erase that 108-year curse that they had, and even the Indians at that time, they hadn't won since 1948. So you had this just clash of 2 franchises that are long starved for a championship, and that game drew 25 million. I would think that if it does get to a point where you see a Game 6, whether it's Yankees up 3-2 or Dodgers up 3-2, you may get close to 20 million. And if it does happen to be in a Game 7, it could even match what the Cubs and Indians did back 8 years ago. So let's see if that's going to be the case, because as I said Monday and I'll say now, if the ratings for this series happen to be anything short of that, baseball's dead. Because name 2 other organizations or 2 other franchises in the sport that's going to have the casual or even just the good sports fan come to the set to watch this series. Now, of course, there's someone like myself, obviously I'm going to watch, or just a die-in-the-wool sports fan, or a diehard baseball fan, or even a real good baseball fan. They're going to watch this series. Now, I don't know if it's a thing where it's 3-1 Yankees, and although they'll be able to clinch a Game 5 in their building, will the regular fan, average fan, will they go and watch and think that, who cares? Because if it's 2-2, I would think people are going to want to watch to see who's going to take over that series, to have to go back to LA, whether it be the Yankees or the Dodgers for a deciding game or for an elimination game in a Game 6. That we'll have to wait and see. But one more time, people, if this is going to be a series where, yes, there's going to be some drama, and we would think with all of the star power that exists on both sides of the coin here, if this doesn't attract a ton of viewers or any interest for the sports fan out there, I don't care how big of a sports fan you are. Even if you're just a regular, I watched the World Series, or I just watched the finals or championship or whatever, well, you're going to watch this. Because this isn't Arizona, Texas like last year, where nobody had a clue as to the personnel of these teams, of these franchises. And I'm sure you couldn't even pick them out of a lineup. I couldn't have someone, the average fan, tell me who Adonis Garcia is, or Adolis Garcia is, or even Corbin Carroll. People know who Shohei Ohtani is. People know who Aaron Judge is. People know Juan Soto, Giancarlo Stanton, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman. They may not know Yoshinobu Yamamoto. They know he makes big payday, but I'm sure the casual sports fan are going to say, wait a minute, didn't they sign that Japanese pitcher who for $325 million? Oh, he's going to pitch in this series? Oh, I want to watch and see how he does. Case closed. So one more time, people, this isn't one of those obscure World Series like last year, or it's not a World Series that, all right, maybe some people will watch, or like Houston, Philadelphia. Now, I get it. Those are 2 big markets. The Astros have had their run, and Philly is Philly. But still, this is New York, LA. And I understand maybe people from Boise, Idaho, to Davenport, Iowa, to Corpus Christi, Texas, they may not care. But as the series goes along, who knows? Maybe it will be riveting for those in those cities and those towns or areas that may want to watch and see how this is going to shake down. If Shohei Ohtani has a 3-homer game in Game 3 at Yankee Stadium, or Aaron Judge does the same in a Game 4 to tie the series, where, I want to see what's going to happen in Game 5. So I wanted to start in that regard before I even get into a preview. So to me, baseball, they have their marquee matchup. Rob Manfred and company, you knew they were drunk Sunday night when the Dodgers won that series, and they're going to have the epic, just gargantuan World Series that they've been waiting for years. And now, let's see, for the whole country and even for the world, because obviously, in Japan, this is going to be a huge deal, but more so here in the U.S., let's see if it's going to generate any buzz and for people that are going to watch on a night-in, night-out basis. Real quick, let me go through the history lesson of these two franchises if you don't even know. First and foremost, going back to the days of Brooklyn. Now, I understand this is well before my time, but I love baseball. It's my first love. And even in the 70s growing up and knowing that just 20 years, even less than that prior, that the Dodgers were in all these World Series against the Yankees. Now, you have to go back to 1941 when they first played. But then when you fast forward to 1947, the first year Jackie Robinson, even 49 when he won the MVP in the National League, and then the 50s, it was all about Dodgers-Yankees. Now, in 51, you had Giants-Yankees, if you remember, the famed shot heard around the world, Bobby Thompson against the Dodgers off of Ralph Branca in the Polo Grounds there in Upper Manhattan, where Yankees-Giants, and of course the Yankees won that World Series, but then you had Yankees-Dodgers in 52, 53, 54, the Giants won where they beat the Indians that year. Of course, the Willie Mays catch over the shoulder, the famed catch that he made again at the Polo Grounds. But then in 55, and 56, 55, finally, the Bums of Brooklyn won the World Series in 7 games, Johnny Padres. And then, of course, 56, you had Don Larson pitch the perfect game at Yankee Stadium, 2-0 in Game 5. And the Yankees went on to win that World Series. So you had a stretch from 41 to 56 where they played, 7 times. And then when the Dodgers went to LA, they played in 63. Sandy Koufax, that was the sweep of the Dodgers, or Dodgers over the Yankees in that year. And then you had to fast forward to 77 and 78. All right, now that's more in my wheelhouse because for those 2 years, I was 8 and 9 years old. And I remember those series as vivid as you can imagine. I remember 78, the 3 home runs by Reggie Jackson, October 18th. In 77, and of course, that was the year the Bronx is burning, the wild summer that it was, where you had the blackout, you had, again, Howard Cosell with the Goodyear blimp, the shots over Yankee Stadium, where the wide angle, where you see Bronx's buildings in the Bronx burning, and of course, him coming out with that quote. And for Jackson to hit those 3 home runs off of 3 pitches against 3 different pitchers, and they win that series. And then in 78, who could forget Reggie Jackson in Game 2 against Bob Welch, that epic at-bat in the 9th inning, where how many pitches it took, Reggie Jackson with the big swings and misses, and of course the strikeout that he just went off into the dugout, just pumping his fist, upset and exasperated that he wasn't able to come through in the clutch. But then the Yankees win the next 4 games, of course Reggie sticking his hip out in Game 4, which turned the series around after the Yankees were down 2-1, and then the rest of that series went the Yankees' way to where Thurman Munson caught a pop-up behind the backstop there, and the Yankees were back-to-back champions. And then you fast forward to 81, where Bob Watson and company had a big home run, I believe it was in Game 2, and they had a 2-0 series lead over the Yankees going back to LA. And in Game 3, where Fernando Valenzuela, and you know I'm going to get to him later on, Fernando, who gutted out. And think of this pitching line when you can't even fathom it. Fernando Valenzuela, who had a 3-run homer by Ron Say in the first inning, and then he gave up, I believe, back-to-back 2-run homers. Bob Watson in the 3rd inning, and I believe Rick Cerrone, the catcher, in the 4th inning. And he was able to pitch a complete game. Had Fernando on the ropes. Here was his stat line on that day. You ready for this? He pitched the whole 9 innings, 147 pitches, 4 runs, 9 hits, 6 strikeouts, 7 walks. Complete game. That is unheard of. But that was baseball in 1981. So he wins a game, number 3. Then you had the game where Reggie Jackson dropped the fly ball and right field where the Dodgers won, and that was the famed Goose Gossage hitting Ron Cey in the helmet, where we thought Cey was just, who knows if he was even breathing, considering that Gossage hit him in the coconut. And then in game number 6, where the Dodgers finally were able to get over the hump, beat the Yankees there at Yankee Stadium. Pedro Guerrero hit a home run. I believe he had 3 co-MVPs, Steve Yeager, Pedro Guerrero, and Ron Cey, as the Dodgers, and I was ecstatic the next day. I didn't watch the whole game. I watched part of it, but then going to school the next day, I was just exuberant knowing that the Yankees finally lost the World Series. But that is your history pretty much in a big giant nutshell between the two teams. And now it's the first time in 43 years, let me do my math correctly, to where these franchises are going to play. And now let's get to the series, and you're going to have Garrett Cole start game 1 against Jack Flaherty. Which Jack Flaherty is going to show up? Is it going to be the game 1 that you saw against the Mets, where he pitched 7 innings of 2 hit balls, 6 strikeouts, or the one that got shelled at Citi Field last week, 3 innings, 8 runs, 8 hits. I believe he had 4 walks and no strikeouts. And then in game 2, you're going to have Yoshinobu Yamamoto, which sets up perfectly for him, because as you all know, the Japanese pitchers, as a starter, how they perform in their native country, they don't have the 4 days or 5 days between starts. They actually have 6 days between starts, and it helps for him because he'll be able to pitch Saturday, game 2. They'll have a day off Sunday, the 3 days at Yankee Stadium, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, a day off Thursday, and then game 6 back in LA that Friday. So it works out perfectly for him. Me personally, I don't like it. I get it that that's how it was in Japan, but that's like an employee. You could work in a company for, let's say, 10 years doing accounting. I'll just throw out that particular job. And you could work accounting in one company for 10 years and then go elsewhere. And then you could even sit there and say, wait a minute, things are different here. What's going on? And well, this is how we did it in my old company. Well, you're not in your old company anymore. You're in your new company. So that should be the same, I would think, for a guy like Yamamoto, who's being paid $325 million over the course of 12 years. I get it. It's his first year. He's young. He's had a lot of injuries this year. But this is for the whole thing. This is for a championship. This is for an organization that, other than the pandemic year 2020, they have not won a World Series over the course of 162 games since 1988. And I get it. He wasn't around at that time to even understand the magnitude of what it would be for a Dodger team to not only be able to celebrate a full season's worth of games and to have a parade, which they did not have in 2020, if you recall. But of course, they're not expected to know that. And I don't even think that the Dodger brass would say, hey, we're paying you all this money. But it worked out for him, so I can't go crazy over that. But for game 2, the start of the Yankees, who knows who that's going to be? Right now, it's undecided. You would think it's going to be Carlos Rodon. But here's the thing. I'm wondering if the Yankees are thinking about pitching him in game 3 to have him at home, just in the likelihood that if Garrett Cole does not pitch well in game 1, and other than a game 4 in Kansas City, which he pitched very well, he has not been the Garrett Cole that we've seen, especially going back to last year when he is the reigning AL Cy Young Award winner. He has not been locked down. He's the guy that you know is going to pitch 7 innings, a 1-run, 3-hit, 10-strikeout ball. And I would think that if somehow, some way, Cole does not get out of that game alive, and let's say he pitches 4 innings and he gives up 5 runs, 7 hits, are you really going to trust Carlos Rodon to carry you through a game 2 to come back to Yankee Stadium tied at 1 game apiece? I don't know. And I know Rodon has pitched very good other than game 1 against the Royals in that division series. But I don't know if that's just a Jedi mind trick that the manager, Aaron Boone, is doing here. Who knows? But it's going to be interesting to see whether or not they're going to announce a game 2 starter prior to tomorrow. As we all know, Garrett Cole's going to start there. And all I'm going to say is this when it comes to factors and just the storylines. We know about the storylines, the history, etc. But how I look at it is that a lot of people are talking about how the Dodger pitching, and yes, it is compromised. No Tyler Glasnow, no Clayton Kershaw. We go on down the list. And the Dodger bullpen, a lot of people thinking, oh, the Yankees are going to feast on that Dodger bullpen considering what they did against the Guardians, especially with their famed bullpen. Well, all I got to say is this, Yankee fans, and this is where I'm going to start to have a little bit of fun here. So, and I get it. I am a Yankee hater. Full admittance. But just because what you did against the Guardians doesn't mean that's going to translate to the series. And yes, you've had some breakthrough and breakout moments there with runners in scoring position. But overall, the runners in scoring position, the numbers are paltry. And the Dodgers, they're a team that, granted, the Met pitching was just brutal. But you saw how many runs that they scored? Now, granted, I don't think the Yankees are going to walk 42 batters in 6 games. That I understand. But it's not as if the Yankee bullpen is of Mariano Rivera, Ramiro Mendoza, and Jeff Nelson either. So the Dodger lineup is just going to be as potent, if not even better than the Yankee lineup, because they've been able to come through in the clutch with runners in scoring position, etc. So one of the storylines to me, although we can talk about the Yankees having the starting pitching edge, and they do on paper, but to me that doesn't guarantee anything, because Garrett Cole has been a shell of his former self just dating back to last year, and Rodon, you don't know what you're going to get from one game to the next. And then that means you have Clark Schmidt and Luis Hill, who... Clark Schmidt, I understand he's been good, but let's say it's 1-1 in Game 3 in his building, and you would think comforts of his own stadium, etc. But that lineup by the Dodgers is formidable. And Luis Hill, if you're down 2-1, how is he going to perform? And I understand that Game 4 is going to be a bullpen game by the Dodgers, you would think, because if you're going to have Game 1 with Flaherty and then Yamamoto Game 2, you would think Walker Buehler is going to pitch Game 3, so that means a bullpen for Game 4, because the last thing you'd want, and I understand the Dodgers in the opening round, they had to do it because they had to go 5 games against the Padres, but they had a scenario where they had a bullpen game in Game 6 against the Mets, and they gave up an early run, and you thought to yourself, uh-oh, this could be a long night for them, but then obviously we saw what happened there as the game unfolded, and they didn't have to worry about the rest of the bullpen throughout the course of that game. So I don't want to give just a straight-up pitching edge, although it does look like it bodes well for the Yankees. But again, how I look at it is that which Cole and which Rodon is going to show up. To me, I think the underlying factor of this series, it's not a matter of, oh, is Aaron Judge going to finally go off, considering he's had his moments. Obviously, Clase in the 9th inning there, or was it in the 8th inning there in game number 3, and maybe he's going to start to come out of it. Or is it going to be the health of Freddie Freeman, how he's going to be able to stand on that bum ankle that he has and play first base? And who knows if the Yankees are going to try to take advantage of Freeman being limited there at the position. We could talk about that. But to me, I think the biggest thing, and we could talk about the bullpens too, and I think the bullpens are even, if you ask me. And I get it. Where Blake Trinan, is that a guy that's going to be shaking in your boots if you're a Yankee fan? Like, oh, we're going to have to worry about this guy? Trinan, who's been very good, and their bullpen is deep. So I don't want to hear from the Yankee fan, oh, we're going to smack their bullpen around. You got to pipe down there, because Luke Weaver and Clay Holmes certainly isn't going to put any fear into the Dodger lineup as well. Here's how I'm going to look at this series right now. No ifs, ands, buts, babies about it. What role players or what players other than the big 3 in each of these lineups are going to deliver? Is it going to be the Gleyber Torreses, who's fared very well at the leadoff spot? You got to wonder whether or not Aaron Boone got into the ear of Carlos Mendoza to say, wait a minute, I know since you put Lindor at leadoff, he's flourished. You think if I put Gleyber as the leadoff, would that be the same? And that's something I thought about, and that's something that no one has talked about. So just keep that in mind. Or is Jazz Chisholm going to come through? Or a guy like Austin Wells, is he going to be able to step up? Anthony Volpe, who I understand got a big hit there in Game 4 in that 9th inning. Are those guys going to be able to match the Max Muncies, the Will Smiths, the Tommy Edman coming off of a MVP in the NLCS? And I'd be shocked if he comes close to even matching what he did against the Mets. Teoscar Hernandez, who killed the Yankees at Yankee Stadium earlier this year. Those guys, I think, and Kike Hernandez, a guy for whatever the reason in the regular season, he's average, and in the postseason, the guy's Babe Ruth. I have more trust in those guys delivering than I do in the Yankee players. And to me, that's what's going to be the big key here. Because like I mentioned, with the Yankees, runners in scoring position, and their woes, despite the fact that they've had the big hits, the Soto in extra innings, and as well as Stanton when he hit that 3-run homer at 3-2, where they should have walked him. And I didn't talk about that the other day, because to me, the Yankees are going to win the series anyway. But the runners in scoring position for the Yankees, they haven't delivered the way the Dodgers have. And even Ohtani, you've seen his numbers where he has not just runners in scoring position, but just guys on base. The guy's batting like 600. So, to me, who's going to step up in that lineup for both the Yankees and the Dodgers could determine the series. Now, yes, I understand you can factor in bullpens and starting pitching, etc., but we understand it's not as if Yamamoto's going to go 8 innings or Garrett Cole or anybody like that, because we all know it's going to be relying on the bullpen. And then for an underlying theme, you have to throw in the specter of Aaron Boone in these games. And I'm not trying to make Dave Roberts out to be Tommy Lasorda, but for Boone, we've seen him in close games with pitching decisions, and I get it may not be all on him. It can be Brian Cashman in the front office and the collaboration, etc. I get it. But we've seen Aaron Boone in the past pull the hook on his starting pitching and be so reliant on that bullpen to where, yes, that may work against the Royals. Yes, that may work against the Guardians, and not to say that that factored in his decision-making in those series, but now it's the Dodgers. You're stepping up 3 times in class to those 2 teams. And I don't want to hear the Guardians, oh, well, they're in first place. They were just a game and a half behind the Yankees in the standings. Well, nah, because the Guardians are light years away from the Dodgers as far as talent, as far as pedigree, etc. So if any Yankee fan is going to even think that the Guardians and Dodgers are in the same stratosphere, you must be watching a different sport. And that's also a big factor into the series too, because yes, Brian Cashman could boo-hoo, oh, well, hey, you want to talk about us having a cakewalk to a World Series? Well, the Guardians are a formidable team. The Royals are pesky and spunky, and what they did in the regular season, they are not the Padres or the Mets. Sorry. Those teams, not to say they can't hold a candle against those teams, but the Padres and the Met payroll compared to the Royals and Guardian payroll are light years away. And we saw what the Padres did in the second half of the year. Granted, right, they lost in 5 games, and people say, well, oh, JAYREELZ, why are you going to bitch about them? Because what did they do in the postseason? I get it. But you mean to tell me that the tougher road to a World Series was more so on the Yankee side than the Dodgers? Then again, what sport are you watching? So couple that with also the patience of the Dodger lineup and them working at bats. And the Yankees, as we've seen time after time after time, other than Soto, Judge is going to flail at that slider down the way. Same for Giancarlo Stanton. Or even a fastball that's up and in. He's going to try to pull it and hit it over the wall. And I'm not trying to make out the Dodgers to be disciplined 101 and the best team going. But we've seen Max Muncy work walks. We've seen guys extend at bats. We've seen the discipline. And yes, they're not infallible when it comes to them not striking out, but they have guys who are patient. They have guys who wait out these pitchers. And if Garrett Cole has a pitch count that's in the 50s and you're only in the 3rd inning, that's going to bode well for the Dodgers in the long run, because that means the Yankee bullpen is going to have to start coming out of that fence in right field, and therefore they're going to get more familiarity with them throughout the course of the series. I'm sure you're probably thinking where I'm leaning, right, people? And no, I will say this. I'm saying this to be fair, and I really mean that, because there is that part of me that just wants to have my Dodger blue and breaking out the pom-poms. But yes, the Yankees, we could talk about the cakewalk. We could talk about their runners in scoring position. But they're here, and they're a dangerous team. And they have a lineup that stacks against the Dodgers. So to me, they wash. So no factor there when it comes to the Yankee victory or the Dodger victory. And with Freeman, who knows? Remember, he didn't start in 2 of the games against the Mets. And I don't know if they're going to be able to afford that here in this series. Granted, he's had 5 days off between Game 6 and Game 1 tomorrow night, but still. So to me, I think the big key is which lineup is going to show up here, and other than the big 3. Because if Teoscar Hernandez, Kike Hernandez, Max Muncy, Will Smith, guys like that, Tommy Edman, if they're going to have anything close to what they had against the Mets, I think the Yankees are going to be toast. And right, what is Anthony Volpe going to do? Jazz Chisholm, Gleyber Torres, Austin Wells, those guys are going to have to step up big time. And yes, we can talk about how they rate that Guardian bullpen, but the Dodger bullpen is really good. And I get it, Michael Kopech, he's wild, but he has a live arm. And guys like Blake Trinan, and who knows if you're going to see Kasparius in there. I'm sure he's going to be more of a long man. Blake Honeywell, I don't know if he's going to be a guy. He's probably going to be another long man, as we saw there in that Mets series. But they got some guys that are some live arms in that bullpen. And it's going to be interesting to see how the Yankee lineup is going to fare against that Dodger bullpen. But to me, it's about the lineups. And we've seen the Dodgers do it in the past. Now it's a matter of the Yankees doing it. And again, Judge waking up, and let's see what's going to happen with him. could stay and continue his torrid stretch, and Soto is Soto. But how it all breaks down here, people, before I move it along, and these are the factors here. Before I get to my personal investment, and I know I'm, 20, almost a half hour into this. And I'll move on to the NFL. Just give me a second here. The Dodgers, with their road to a World Series, and I truly think that the pandemic, although it's official, is legit, but I really believe that this team is looking to capture a title based on all the talk about them not winning a legit full season World Series, the length in their lineup. Also, the Yankees are stepping up in class against the competition. Not that they're going to fear the Dodgers, and not that they're inferior, and not that they're a big underdog, because they're not. They're a very slight underdog in the series. And yes, can the Yankees win this World Series? Absolutely. I'm not trying to sit here and say that the Yankees have no shot or whatever. And I get it. I've come off from watching 6 close games, and granted, the Met pitching awful. And I don't expect the Yankee pitching to be anything close to what the Mets have done with all those walks and having all those opportunities for the Dodgers to score runs, as you saw, the double digits in how many of those games in the wins. But I truly feel that the Dodgers, and with their lineup, forget about the bullpen, the starting pitcher could get knocked around here. And if Yamamoto could even come close to duplicating what he did at Yankee Stadium, where he pitched 7 innings with 2-hit ball, and I believe he struck out 7, then I would think the Dodgers are going to win the series. And now, I'm going to predict Dodgers in 6. I can see a split in the first 2 games, and I can see the Dodgers winning 2 out of 3 before coming home and winning a game 6. Could it go 7 games? Of course. And I would still think that the Dodgers will prevail in 7, but I'm going to go hard and say Dodgers in 6. And now, for my personal investment to the baseball gods above, and I get it, one of these years, it is going to snap. But having to deal with going back to 77, 78, having to deal with 96, 98, 99, and of course 2000, and then even that 9-year gap from 2000 to 2009, the last time the Yankees won a World Series, there have been a lot of sleepless winners during that time, and especially during the mid to late 90s into 2000. I mean, all you heard was John Sterling, Yankees win, the Yankees win. And Sterling is back in the fold, as we know. Why? I don't know. I don't know if it was a thing where he wanted to come out of retirement, or the Yankees decided, hey, come on back for this end of the regular season playoff run. I'm tired of the home run calls. It's played out. Sterling, he's just sort of bowed out. And of course, if they're going to invite him to come back, of course he's going to come back. But hopefully this is the end of Sterling. And hopefully this will be the end to the point where when it's all said and done, that'll come out and say, ball game over, World Series over, Dodgers win, he could go off into the sunset, and we don't have to hear John Sterling anymore for as long as I live. And yes, I do not have the pillows puffed up yet. And of course, I'm going to be sweating out these games, because if you haven't watched or followed or even subscribed over the last 14 years, every time that the last out was recorded by the opposing team beating the Yankees, whether it be in a playoff series, and now that it's come full circle, because last year the Yankees didn't even make it to the postseason. And it was anticlimactic, because although it felt good that they didn't make it into October, but it was almost like, all right. And I have a vlog about that, shameless plug, on my YouTube channel, so go check it out. It's under my sports vlogs, where 2023, another winter I could sleep in peace, rest in peace to the Yankees. But now it's the flip side. From last year not making it to the World Series or making it to the playoffs, now they're in the World Series. And now I have to stick out these 4, 5, 6, or 7 games on whether or not the Dodgers are going to prevail, so I could have another winter I could sleep in peace. And I can only hope from the baseball gods on down that that is going to be the case, because I don't even want to hear from any Yankee fan, whether it's from here in the Bronx, out on Long Island, upstate New York, out in Jersey, Connecticut, and beyond. Because I'm sure they're going to flood my wall, social media accounts, feeds, etc. to say, all right, JAYREELZ, here's a bottle of whatever it is. Well, I don't know what sleeping pills are out there. And I'm sure they're going to do that. But you know what? It's all good. Because for 14 years, I've been able to have a nice, peaceful winter of sleep. Will it be 15? Stay tuned. Now I have to get to Fernando Valenzuela. And Fernando, 63 years of age. If you had seen the pictures and video recently of why he had to step down, he had done the Spanish, I believe, color. I don't know if he did play-by-play, but the Dodger radio Spanish side where he wanted to take time for his health. And seeing some of the videos and pictures of him, I mean, you couldn't even recognize him. And the cause of his death is unknown at the moment. 63. He's 8 years older than I am. And for Fernando Mania, I remember it like it was yesterday. Cover of Sports Illustrated, when he came to Shea Stadium, I believe he was 5-0 at the time. And he went through a stretch where he started off his rookie season 8-0 with 5 shutouts, and his ERA was under 1. And when he came to Shea Stadium and the Mets in 81, seriously, they drew 3,000 fans to the ballpark. That's how bad they were. And when Fernando came into town, I believe they may not have sold out the ballpark, but they had anywhere between 30 and 40,000, which in essence at Shea Stadium at the time was a sellout. And yes, how could you forget his pitching motion? The big high leg kick, the look to the skies, if he's looking to the heavens above, to the good Lord, before he delivered a pitch. He had that screwball. The game in the World Series that I talked about, a big game in Montreal, Game 5 where they won to go to a World Series. Fernando Mania was real, and especially in Southern California, where the Mexican influence in that region, how he just, not only just in that area, but really blew the nation by storm with his, and he was 20 years old at the time. So for him to not only be the Cy Young Award winner, but also capture the Rookie of the Year and be a champion all in the same year. And granted, he did not have a Hall of Fame career, but he had a very good career. Pitched a no-hitter in 1990. Had a lot of success in the major leagues. Bounced around on a bunch of different teams. California Angels, also pitched for the San Diego Padres, a couple other teams along the way. And for him to be such an influence and really a hero in that part of California. And I even heard stories from some of my people, thankfully my followers, my guy Bio Zio on YouTube, Bruce Gonzalez, who hit me up and said had a very interesting story about Fernando Valenzuela where he got an autographed ball from him. And yeah, I mean, that's the impact that this guy had. And I also want to throw this out. I don't watch First Take. I watch on Wednesdays only because of Christopher Mad Dog Russo. I love Russo dating back to his days at WFAN. And for them not to even mention Fernando Valenzuela, even in a quick blurb, they had those quick takes, is a disgrace. And I don't care if the demographic that they have, 18 to 34, wouldn't know who Fernando Valenzuela if he fell on him. But for them to not even mention Fernando Valenzuela is an absolute sports malpractice. How could you do that? And especially in light of Yankees-Dodgers, which they spent the last 2 minutes of the broadcast yesterday trying to get a prediction from Dog and even from Stephen A., how they waited. And I get it. You had the big trade with DeAndre Hopkins. You had a couple other things going on. And, of course, opening night with the NBA. I get it. But can you spend a little more than 5 seconds on the World Series and especially Fernando Valenzuela and what he meant to LA and what he meant to baseball at that time where it was in the middle of a strike season? And, of course, everything has to be about the NFL and the NBA. And, oh, yeah, there is a World Series. And the Dodgers are playing in it. And one of their key figures passed. I mean, it's inexplicable how sports in 2024 just pushes everything aside because it's all about the Shield or the NBA. Disgraceful. But for Fernando, I digress, Fernando. May you rest in peace. Thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to his family, the Dodger family, Major League Baseball. And you know they're going to have a moment of silence, I would think, and a tribute to Fernando before Game 1, which who knows, that could also be another thing that could fuel the Dodgers as far as them winning a World Series to win it for Fernando. So you want to throw that in there? Please be my guest. And then the last thing in baseball before I kick it into overdrive, the Rays. I got to bring this up because this is weird. Major League Baseball wants the Rays to stay in Tampa and to play in the Tropicana Field, despite the fact that when Hurricane Helene ripped through there a week or two ago, the roof was just torn off. Not the entire roof, but a majority of it. And they're saying that even if it's not fit to play, we still want you to figure it out. Well, how are you going to do that when it rains in the summertime every 5 minutes? So for Major League Baseball to do that, it almost be like, all right, it's up to you guys. You figure it out. Seriously? You can't do your best to patched together, Scotch tape, bubble gum. I understand that could be even more of an embarrassment because then it leaks through the roof, etc. But to me, you're leaving yourself out to just be exposed for ridicule, for everything, for not having that franchise, whether set up in another ballpark, which I'm sure they're doing right now, but to do whatever it takes to get that roof fixed between now and the end of March. And I get it, it's a short window to try to put everything together and to get it sturdy and official and approved no matter what. But baseball, send whatever money you can down there, and even Stu Sternberg, the owner, to do whatever it takes to fix that building up. And I understand they don't want to fix it up if they're going to be having another new ballpark in the near future, whatever, in the next 4 or 5 years or so. But what are you going to do in the meantime? To me, that's just terrible. But anyway, I just had to bring that up on top of everything. All right, now let me shift gears. NFL, helmet and shoulder pads. Let me get to that. A lot of news and notes coming out of the NFL this week. And the first take I want to bring forth, the Baltimore Ravens. Now, they won a game on Monday night. They were down 10-0, and then all of a sudden, they just turned it into really warp speed and just blew by the Buccaneers as if they were standing still to the tune of 41-31 was the final. Lamar Jackson threw for 5 touchdowns. Derrick Henry, who's on pace to break Eric Dickerson's all-time single-season rushing record of 2,105 rushing yards. I believe he's on pace to go 21-24. Now, mind you, there's an extra game, which you'll have to put an asterisk next to it. If he breaks the 21-05 in 16 games, then to me that's legit. But because of the 17th game, and I understand it's still going to be a record when it's all said and done, but Dickerson did it in 16 games. Now, of course, there's a lot of people that could argue, and rightfully so. Well, O.J. Simpson, who initially got 2,000 yards the first ever, I believe it was 2003 was the final number. He did it in a 14-game season. So yes, you could certainly argue that. But even with Dickerson, 21-05, to have that extra game, just like T.J. Watt when he tied Michael Strahan for the sack record back, 2-3 years ago, he did that in the 17th game. So to me, I understand it's a record when it's all said and done, but you do have to remember an extra game was tacked onto that. Just keep that in mind. But the Ravens, you have to argue whether or not they're the best team, despite the fact that the Lions are 5-1, that the Chiefs, they're undefeated at 6-0. But with the way the Ravens have played, especially offensively, it's similar to what we saw last year toward the end of the year where they peaked, when they blew out the Dolphins in their building, which was no surprise there, where they scored 50-some-odd points. But then they went to San Francisco, and we knew the Niners were on a trajectory there where, of course, we all know now, as opposed to then, where they went to a Super Bowl, but they obliterated the Niners in their building on a Monday night on Christmas. And now it's almost as if after the hiccup there, I understand if Isaiah likely would have caught the ball in bounds, who knows? John Harbaugh would have gone for 2 there to win the game, and then inexplicably losing to the Raiders the following week, and they had a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. How that happened, I don't know, an aberration. But since then, they've just steamrolled the competition. And now it's almost as if they have picked up from where they left off last year to the point where, could this be the team in the AFC that goes to a Super Bowl? Way too early to tell. Still a long season to go. I know a lot of the talk about MV3 for Lamar Jackson winning a 3rd MVP, and it'll be back-to-back for him. I think it's still too early. There's still a lot of football to be played. Let's see come playoff time where we can revisit this, because a lot of people could say, is it now or never for the Ravens? All right, we could argue that right this very second, but we're approaching week 8. You still have 10 more games to go in the season. So much could happen. Injuries, a lot could take place. So I'm not going to sit here to say, oh, I think they're going to be a threat to go to a Super Bowl in the 83. Well, they are a threat, but are they a lot to make it to New Orleans and punch their ticket for Super Bowl 59? Not this guy. And I'm not saying that because I'm an anti-Raven, but let's see how it plays out. We still got to wait for Lamar to come through in a big game on a big stage in the postseason, which he has not done. This is his time to do it. This will be his year and his opportunity for him to do that. But right now, there's still a ways to go. Are they the best? I'm not going to say that. Are they the hottest team? I'd have to say that. But let's see how this season unfolds, and then we'll revisit it later on. You had a big trade there where the Chiefs, you knew they were going to trade for a wide receiver. I know a couple of weeks ago I said Mike Williams because of that fallout with Aaron Rodgers throwing him under the bus and then the Jets acquiring Devontae Adams. But for them to get DeAndre Hopkins from the Tennessee Titans for a conditional 3rd-round pick, I mean, that's a no-brainer. Now, Hopkins, what does he have left? Number one, I still think he has plenty left, considering that he is a former All-Pro, and now he has a quarterback that could get him the ball. Now, I understand that's going to open up the double teams that maybe Travis Kelce had. And even though, to me, Travis Kelce is a bit long in the tooth, I know he could still be effective. But I guess when Hopkins, once he's integrated, that could be a situation where Kelce will get more opportunities. That we'll have to wait and see. But that was a big trade, a good trade. And I wouldn't be surprised if KC gets even another fringe guy to come in there, because you would think Hopkins is now going to be the focal point of their passing game and to try to slow him down, although that could open up opportunities for Kelce. But with the other injuries that they've had, Juju Smith-Schuster and Hollywood Brown, and even with the speedster there, Worthy, coming out of Texas, I don't know how much of a factor he's going to be in this offense. So the Chiefs certainly have stepped up there, and let's see how they fare with the former All-Pro. Then you had a couple of other trades here where Seattle's dealing for, speaking of the Titans again, it seems like they're starting to, I don't want to say clean house, but Ernest Jones, the former Ram linebacker who wanted out of LA, gets traded to Tennessee and now to Seattle as they try to shore up their defense and see if they can make a run in the NFC West. The Texans bringing another linebacker, Devin White, formerly of the Bucks and also of the Eagles, which that didn't work out in Philadelphia. So let's see if he could resurrect his career in Houston under DeMeco Ryans and company, which if he's healthy, I'm sure he'll be a big plus there. Then you have, speaking of Tampa, I know Chris Godwin done for the year. Chances are it could be an Achilles, and then you have Mike Evans with a hamstring. So talk about a team that's going to need a wide receiver. I know Cooper Kupp has been rumored here as a possible trade bait scenario, and with the Rams hosting the Vikings tonight, if they beat the Vikings tonight, they'll still be in the hunt for a fringe playoff. And even with the NFC West as it is, because if they win tonight, they'll be 3-4, and they'll be within arm's length of the Niners and the Seahawks. So maybe they won't be able to trade right away. They'll have to wait and see how it's going to unfold. And remember, the Rams were 3-6 last year before they made a run and made it into the postseason. So I don't know if that's going to happen. So you would think that the Buccaneers are going to try to get a wide receiver, and maybe even the same will have to be said for the Niners, because they lost Brandon Ayuk, as you know, torn ACL, MCL. I know Jawan Jennings, I believe he may be out for some significant amount of time. Debo, who was battling a pneumonia, was in the hospital, came out. So who knows what they're going to do. And I get it that they got the kid who unfortunately had that incident right before the start of the season. The kid whose name's eluding me right now, I know will come to me in a second. Number 1 pick, Ricky Pearsall, thank you. He's a guy that was shot and had to recuperate from that. Thankfully, he's healthy, and I believe he's been practicing, so I don't know how much burn he's going to get as he's slowly going to be implemented into the Niner offensive program. So you got that. When it comes to what's happening with wide receivers being injured and wide receivers possibly going here, going there, and what teams are going to look to try to shore up their not only just offense but defense, because the trade deadline is actually a week from tomorrow, November 1st. And let me just double check that. No, it may be the 5th. That's actually Election Day. I take that back. Let me pull that up. Hold on. I believe it's 4 p.m. on Election Day, November 5th, the trade deadline. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of transactions going on as we get closer to the deadline, and you know I'll be on top of that. And let me see what we got schedule-wise for the week. Oh, you have Jameson Williams suspended 2 games for violating the performance-enhancing substance violation, and this is on the heels of last year missing the first 6 games because of gambling. So Jameson Williams, I don't know what's going on there, but he's got to get his mind straight, and hopefully he'll get these 2 games passed and get back on the field. But your games this week, very slim. Sorry, people. I mean, your 425 game, think about this. Your 425 game, I believe it's Kansas City at Vegas. I don't think it's Chicago at Washington, where record-wise that looks nice, but is that a game you're going to want to run to the sets? Whatever Romo and Nance are doing, and chances are it's probably going to be Kansas City, Vegas, because I don't know if they're going to the nation's capital with Jaden Daniels with his ribs, and I believe, although he's on the injury report, but I would believe he's going to play. And for the other 4 o'clock games, Carolina at Denver, far from a Super Bowl rematch of yesteryear, and Buffalo at Seattle. All right, you want to? No thanks for me. And then your 1 o'clock games, Philly at Cincinnati is probably your highlight game. You could say Indianapolis at Houston only because if Indy wins, they will draw in a flat-footed tie at the top of the AFC South. And remember, Houston beat Indianapolis in week 1. So if Houston wins and the game's in their building, they'll sweep the season series and in all intents and purposes will win a division. But Indianapolis may have a say here, so let's see how the Colts will do down in H-Town and see if they could draw even with the Texans. But besides that, you do not have a big schedule. I know Atlanta and Tampa's on the docket. Both teams at 4-3. Atlanta already has a leg up considering they beat them on a Thursday night a few weeks ago. So if Atlanta wins, they'll have the tiebreaker if they fall at a flat-footed tie at the end of the year. And Tampa wants to bounce back from that Monday night disaster. So, all right, I'll give you that game. But other than that, Baltimore, Cleveland, now you have Jameis Winston's going to be the starter. Tennessee at Detroit. Arizona at Miami. Ugh. Jets at New England. Ugh. Green Bay at Jacksonville. Ugh. New Orleans at the Chargers. No thanks. Your Sunday night game is Dallas at San Francisco. Unlike last year, where Dallas, I believe, was 4-1 and San Francisco was 5-0. Certainly a far cry from that, but it is a marquee matchup. Your Monday night matchup is Giants at Pittsburgh. Woo! That's all I got to say about this week's schedule. And nobody's on a bye this week, which is weird because I guess they took a week off of the bye. I guess they'll pick that up next week. Any London games next week? No London games, and you do have 2 byes, Pittsburgh and San Francisco the following week. So, interesting stretch. So the Steelers, they can win Monday night, and then we'll have a bye before their gauntlet of a season, which will start against the Commanders in Washington the following week. So, that's what you have with the NFL. College, your schedule this week, you have some decent games. Unlike the last few weeks where you had these marquee games, Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia, Texas. Before that, Alabama and Georgia. But not too bad this week. You got some games to chew on, starting with Notre Dame and Navy. Navy ranked in the top 25. Let's see if they could pull off an upset. And this isn't a vintage Notre Dame team by any stretch. And the game is being played on the other side of the river at MetLife. So I don't know who's going. I don't know if that's going to be a ticket that's already sold out. But they are going to play against one another. And I think it's a 3:30 game. Or maybe it's an early game. Maybe it's at noon. Then you have Illinois going to Oregon, which, all right, Illinois because they're ranked in the top 20, but now they're stepping up in class here to play the Ducks. But again, they're 2 ranked teams. Anything can happen, but I think Oregon will prevail. You have Mizzou, and I believe their running back is not going to play. And Brady Cook, as I talked about on Monday, left after the first series with an ankle that needed to be examined, and then he came back late in the third quarter, led his team to 2 fourth-quarter touchdown drives in a win on Saturday, but now he's going into a deep end of the pool to play at Alabama, and Bama's going to try to wash off the stink and the stench of the game against Tennessee on Saturday. So we'll see what's going to happen there, but that should be a good game. Texas playing Vandy, only Vandy because they're ranked in the top 25 at 25 right now. Texas on the road to try to bounce back from that loss to Georgia. A historic matchup, Florida State going to Miami. Far from a vintage Florida State-Miami game, but you have that on the docket. And then at night, you have LSU and Texas A&M, which is a big game for both teams because LSU, if they lose here, they have 2 losses and they can't afford to lose again. They still have Alabama on the schedule, although Alabama goes to Baton Rouge. So keep that in mind. And then Texas A&M as well. Let's see how they fare and try to keep their hopes alive because they're ranked 14th, right there on the outside of the top 12. But if Texas A&M wins, they will certainly catapult themselves into you would think, into the top 12, and LSU will fall back a few spots. We understand it's not about where they rank, but it does help. But again, if any one of these teams incur their second loss, then they're going to have to play perfect football throughout if they are going to gain any measure of support for the college football playoff. So that's what I have there with college football. We'll certainly recap that all on Monday. Now let me turn my attention to the NBA because the NHL, not much really going on, but I'll touch on that in a minute. NBA, there are a few things to discuss. The Celtics get their rings opening night, banner race to the rafters, and the reigning champs, the reigning defending champs, all they did was rain threes on the Celtics, on the Knicks, pardon the faux pas, for them to at a clip. And you can see from the first attempt where Jason Tatum hit that 3 from the wing, 3-0, and they just blew the doors off of the Knicks, and their hopes of the Knicks fan thinking that they could go into Boston and compete with the defending champs. What was the final? 132-109. But I have to say this. As a longtime Celtic fan, I think my cousin would attest to this, and I was light on them on my sports shorts. I put out my shorts on YouTube at JAYREELZ, as you know, or if you don't know, please go to subscribe there on YouTube. But for the Celtics to drain 29 threes pretty much in a little over 3 quarters, and then they called off the dogs. You're not going to see Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, Drew Holiday, etc. But for them to try to break the record, which was held by the 2020 Buck team that Drew Holiday happened to be on, and for the Celtics to try to chuck 3 after 3 after 3 after 3, and they knew that they wanted to get this record. Mind you, when the night began, did anybody have any idea who held the record for the most three-point attempts made in a game? I sure didn't. And boy, did they try long and hard, and they had plenty of time to do it, to the tune where the final 13 three-point attempts at the end of the game, they all missed. So in the process, in this blowout, and I get it, if the game was close and they were trying to do it and they did it, it would have been more of an embarrassment. But nevertheless, it was embarrassing to me watching this unfold, chucking 3 after 3 after 3 after 3, and all they did was lay bricks. And how I looked at it was, guys, can we maybe pump the brakes and move the ball a little bit, maybe try to attack the basket and then try to kick it out for a 3? No, and I get it. This is how the Celtics play. Because when they're knocking threes like that, and not even 29 threes in a game, but let's say if they're hitting 12, 15, 17 3-point shots a game, they're going to be impossible to beat. And it's not as if they have 1 or 2 3-point shooters. They have multiple 3-point shooters, which they're tough to defend and tough to slow down and tough to stop. And that's why the Celtics are going to be tough to beat as they try to defend their championship. But please, could Joe Mazzulla, the coach, say, guys, slow it down. Let's get a couple of possessions where we can attack the basket, maybe get to the free throw line. We understand that there's no mid-range jumpers when it comes to the Celtics. But can we do that instead and then maybe go back where you're going to have that open shot? Because to me, even in a blowout win, and even though the Knicks didn't belong on the same court, at least for that night, against the defending champs, but they embarrassed themselves. They did. And people can say, well, who are you to say, JAYREELZ? Well, when you're watching this and as a fan of the team, you have to avert your eyes. Because they just keep missing shot after shot after shot. That, I was almost like, guys, can we just pump the brakes here? Can we regroup? Can we just not chuck a 3 every time we go down the court because of his silly record? Which, who knows? A year, 2 years, 3 years from now, when a team gets hot and they try to break it, people are going to forget about what happened there last night. So anyway, so that was just my one bad takeaway from what was a banner night for the Celtics there on Tuesday night. Then you had the LeBron Bronny thing. Do I really need to unpack this? I mean, he went in there for 3 minutes. They came in with 4 minutes to go. And I'm sure you saw the graphic. I want to say, and I don't remember off the top of my head, but the plus minus during that time where Bronny, I don't want to put it all on Bronny James, but I believe it was a 53-41 deficit. Turned out to be like 55-49 or something like that. So the turnaround there was stark, where Bronny James came in, had the 3 minutes, I believe had a rebound, didn't record a basket. Let me double check that because I didn't watch the game. At that time, I was in bed. There was no way I was going to watch the entire game or to see if he was going to come back in garbage time. And as we know that the Lakers won the game, beating the T-Wolves 110-103. But for Bronny James, who I believe did make a 3-point attempt, but did not register a point, because if that was the case, that would have been a big point and everybody would have went crazy knowing that, oh, he scored a point. Yes, he was 0 for 2, 0 for 1 from 3, did not even make a free throw, or I don't even think, did not even have a free throw attempt. So those 3 minutes registered nothing, just 1 rebound. And yes, this is a big story from the standpoint of, for LeBron's sake, for the family, 100%. For NBA history, it hasn't been done, great. Obviously, we saw Ken Griffey Jr. and his dad there to commemorate and celebrate that, fine. But in the grand scheme of things, what does it mean? Nothing. 0. That's it. We saw it. It happened. They were on the court together. He took a 3-point shot, passed from his dad, didn't make it, whatever. But I don't think it was a giant sports story. I know there's people trying to dredge. Hey, did you see? Okay, we saw it, and that was it. What more can be said? So let's just move on from that. And then you have an injury already with the Pelicans, who traded for Dejounte Murray, who fractured his hand late in the game against the Bulls. I believe Zach LaVine was defending him and coming up lame. Who knows if he's going to be out indefinitely. We know he's going to be out for the time being as he fractured his hand. So that we'll have to wait and see as a New Orleans Pelicans team that I would think is going to expect big things with a healthy Zion and with their head coach Willie Green and some good players there on that team to maybe be I don't want to go as far as saying a force, but maybe a team that could be a player out west. As I talked about on my NBA preview, if you haven't watched or listened, please do so. Apple, Spotify, of course, they're on YouTube. So check that out as I talk about the difference there out west between the young guns trying to make a statement and the old guns trying to see if they still got it. So please check that out. And the season is only a couple days old. And then Rudy Gobert signed 3 years, $110 million extension. Just want to throw that in there for the Timberwolves. Besides that, that's what I got for the NBA. We're only a couple games in. I'm not going to get crazy about what happened or what went down over the last couple of days. So we will certainly uncover the NBA as we move it along. And then lastly, I'll spend just a quick second on the NHL. I know Nashville finally got a win. Good for them. They were 0-5. They shut out the Bruins there the other night as they got off the snide. Now, San Jose is the only team that is not registered a victory in the sport here over the first 2.5 weeks of the season. So let's see if San Jose will do that. Winnipeg, still perfect undefeated, 6-0. I know you have teams that are 5-0-1. I know the Rangers, they've been killing teams, killed the Canadians, and the Rangers will host the Florida Panthers tonight in an Eastern Conference Final rematch. So let's see how those two teams will handle tonight's game, as I'm sure that's going to be one to watch, and maybe I'll keep an eye on that tonight in light of the Vikings and Rams there on Thursday night. And now the Avalanche, who started off 0-4, they've won 3 straight. So let's see, now that they got their season on track, if they can continue their winning ways here over the course of the weekend and beyond. But for the NHL, yeah, that's what I have. I have nothing really much to unpack there. Early season matchup there with Rangers and Panthers. That I'm curious to see how that will shake down at the Garden as the Rangers. And I know they've been bludgeoning their opponents, scoring a ton of goals, beating the Canadians there the other night 7-2. Remember the opener there against the Penguins, 6-0. And the Rangers, who only have an overtime loss to the Utah Hockey Club, have been otherwise perfect. But that'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books. Thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you so much for listening to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the world of sports. If you haven't done so, as I've said throughout the course of this particular podcast, please subscribe, rate, review, Apple, Spotify, the YouTube channel, at JAYREELZ. Come on, people. I need your help. I'm trying to increase the visibility of this podcast with those who aren't familiar with it, with those who want more sports in their life, some real sports talk, true sports talk, good sports talk. You know I got you guys and gals covered. Share it with your family, friends, foes, frenemies, with people, whether they're diehards or not. I don't care. Just spread the word. I would sincerely and gratefully appreciate it. If you haven't done so on my social media, if you haven't jumped on board there, if you want to send me a question, comment, or suggestion, you can do so at the following: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ Podcast, Twitter, X, JAYREELZ1, just the number, the old-fashioned way, the JAYREELZ Podcast at gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to follow up with anything that you throw at me, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood. It's in the DNA. Since birth, talking sports, this is what I'm made to do. This is why I quit my job to pursue this passion, to do what it is that I love, because where else are you going to get everything that I just said? When it comes to Major League Baseball, a World Series preview, a complete breakdown, talking about Fernando Valenzuela and his death, the NFL, all the transactions, Baltimore Ravens, the Week 8, Week 9 in college football, NBA, NHL. I cover it all, people. Where else are you going to get that in roughly an hour or so? With nothing but fire, passion, energy, fury, with my thoughts, opinions, critiques, praise, analysis, feelings on anything and everything that happens on the world of the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ Podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to the South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ Podcast, on the flip, baby.